Hello, it's time for another I Ching video. A bit overdue in time, actually. As always, I'm using the Magician's I Ching, which is my own text, and you can get that off Amazon or from the Aeon Books website. The Magician's I Ching. So, today we're going to be taking a look at hexagram number 9, which is called Xiao Chu. It means the small nourisher. I've already drawn it this time, so I don't waste time on that. And this is the hexagram. It's the world. It's heaven below and air above. And what is the small nourisher? Well, the governing line is that fourth line there, which is the only yin line in the whole hexagram. And a lot of times you see this in the hexagrams of the I Ching, where if there's only one line that's different from all the others, then that line is absolutely central to the thematic of the hexagram. And it applies whichever of the two, and then the way it's central depends on where in the hexagram it is. In this case, you have the yin line is the fourth line. It's the bottom of the second trigram. It's the line traditionally attributed to the minister. And so this has a connotation of this small line is in a position where it is influencing what is above and what is below it, because it's right on that border between the two trigrams. And it's being influenced by what's above, and it's influencing what's below. And it can influence it in a good way or a bad way. You see the image associated with it says the wind, that is the air element, blows softly across the sky, the heaven. Dense clouds form, but there's not yet rain. And so this is in reference to that. The fourth line. The fourth line is gaining in influence. It's rising. It's moving upwards in the hexagram. So it's having an influence on the fifth line, the ruler line. But it has not yet gotten to a position of power. You'll see when I talk about the lines that it infers, if you get the fifth or the sixth line, that there's a great amount of growth of that power. So the symbolism of this is like there's clouds on the horizon, but that greatness is not yet there. So right now is the time of small gains. And so you can understand this hexagram, if you get it, for example, in a casting, as meaning that there's a movement that's happening, but it isn't really getting anywhere yet. Okay? You have the conditions are not yet ripe for either greatness or disaster. So there's opportunity at this time to do small things, to do significant things, but not everything. Right? The description says, small nourishment promising success. Dense clouds form in the western borderlands, but there is no rain yet. The West are frontier territories in the context of the time when the I Ching was written. So it implies that problems could arise from these unstable territories, but it hasn't yet manifested. Right? So we can proceed in our affairs without concern that there's going to be immediate disaster. You shouldn't stop what you're doing. You should continue. But you have to be aware that there's a potential for this negative influence to eventually build up. Likewise, you can achieve things right now, but because of that concern, that situation, you can't look to accomplish great things because there will be the potential of disaster to follow, right? The great work, the advice to the superior individual, which in the Yifa society is a centrally important part of any reading of an I Ching hexagram, says the superior individual should engage in scholarly matters and refine his virtue. And those aren't chosen by coincidence. They're chosen because they're related to those two elements that make up the hexagram, the two trigrams, You have heaven, which is at the foundation there, which is virtue. Virtue connects to the element of heaven. And scholarly matters, that's the air element, which connects to the mind and to the power of the intellect. There's also another way to understand this hexagram as one where you have this domination of virtue and scholarly matters, and yet there's also an emotional influence, a nagging emotional influence that's going on there. That sounds almost a little sexist, but you got to remember that the I Ching works very much on this masculine-feminine paradigm, and it's the yin element, that feminine element, is when it's well influenced, it can signify yielding in the appropriate ways. It can signify an openness. It can signify all kinds of good things, right? When it's negatively influenced, then it can signify problems. And you'll see in the lines, there's some of these lines that end up getting the good side of that feminine influence and some that get the bad side, right? So the first line says, come back to this path. There's no harm and good luck to continuing. So the first line is usually about, in most hexagrams, about things that haven't started yet, right? Or when you're right at the beginning of this process. And a lot of times the first line is saying, oh, it's not time yet, or things that aren't happening yet. In this hexagram, an interesting thing happens here, is that the first line is a solid yang line, which is proper. The fourth line is a yielding yin line, which is proper. Remember, feminine lines, the yin lines, are better if they're in an even numbered position, going from 1 to 6 from the bottom, right? And masculine lines are better if they're in an odd numbered line. And so these two are very well matched. And what this suggests in the first line is that you might be nervous because you see clouds in the distance, but actually this isn't in any way bad to you. It's on the contrary, it's good for you. For if you're at the very bottom, if you're at the very start, it's okay. Proceed on the path. There's no danger, right? In fact, come back to the path if you were about to quit. The second line says, bringing yourself back to the right way, returning to your duties and commitments, good luck. And this is because the second is in the governing position of the lower trigram. It's not unduly influenced by that fourth line. But then we get to the third line, and it says, the wheel of the carriage breaks, husband and wife quarrel and separate. Okay? Here you have a yin and a yang line right next to each other, right? And sometimes that can be good, but here this is very bad for the guy in line 3, the yang line, right? And that's because, as it was mentioned, that this yin line is in an upward rising motion. It's moving away from, it's not connecting to what is below it. It's moving away from it. So its influence is proving to be negative. That's what it means by the husband and the wife are the solid line and the broken line. They're separating. They're moving away from each other. And this causes great problems. The wheel of the carriage breaks is symbolic of your momentum gets trashed, right? And in fact, the third line in the hexagram is traditionally associated with the lower minister, the lower bureaucrat who's trying, and this is all the language of the Confucian court, right? That's trying to ascend to the higher status, right? But here he is thwarted by this weak line. This weak line is in no position to help him, wants nothing to do with him, and so he's got no support. The wheel of the carriage is broken, and that's the end for him. He can't keep moving forward. At least not at this time. The fourth line says, fear and struggle are avoided by confident support. Now, here you have a situation that could be described as fear and struggle because it's the only weak force surrounded by very strong forces, right? That is, you're not inherently, if you're in the fourth line, not inherently in a position of strength. You're relatively weak, but you're being supported by, and in turn you are serving the fifth line. So here, because this yin line is moving up towards the fifth line, it's correctly serving the ruler. The fifth line is the ruling king line, the most important line. And it in turn will protect and support the fourth line. So it ends up being well-omened. The fifth line says, confidence leads the strong to unite to you and can thus be benevolent to troubled neighbors. So here we're talking about a situation that is more or less ideal. The fifth is just right. He's got a yin below him, a yang above him. He's uniting these various forces. He's showing correct benevolence by protecting the weak line below it. It's somebody who is making the right moves, who's showing the right kind of certainty and the right kind of benevolence, and is just in a really good situation of the balance of the influences of yin and yang. And then we get up to the sixth line. The sixth line says, the clouds build up too much. They cannot contain themselves. Rain pours down. The moon has become full now, and there is danger, particularly for women. If the superior individual keeps trying to build themselves up, there will be disaster. So you notice that back in when I was talking about what the great work said, it said that the superior individual should engage in scholarly matters and refine his virtue. And in other words, that means build yourself up in this time, right? Work at advancement. Keep going with that momentum. But the sixth line suggests that if you've built yourself up too greatly, if you've taken too much of a position of aloofness, then you're separate from what's going on that's real around you. And it's an excess of yin influence here that is causing that. It's gone too far. And so now the rain really pours, right? This is an implication that if the fourth line rises up to the fifth line, things are okay. If that influence there. If it rises all the way up to the sixth line, then everything above becomes yin influenced and it's a disaster, right? So you want to be careful if you're getting the sixth line. You don't want to allow an overwhelming effort of becoming so refined, so concerned with these matters that are above mundane affairs that you don't notice those barbarians in the wilderness, in the border kingdoms that are about to cause a revolt. Okay, you want to be able to stay at least close enough to the ground, well connected. You want to be a balance between yin and yang. That's what this is all talking about. There's another detail here that I'm just going to mention in passing in this video, which is that there is, of course, another hexagram in the I Ching, which is called the Great Nourisher, Da Chu, which is hexagram 26. And you'll notice if you've got the I Ching, any version, but of course I recommend the Magician's I Ching, you could check it out and you'll notice that it's a little bit different from hexagram 9, and it's well worth your while if you're at the kind of a beginner in I Ching studies to look at both of those and try to understand the differences between them and why one of them is the small nourisher and the other is the great nourisher. Okay, but I'll leave that for you. That's your homework if you want it. And that's everything for today. If you like this video, please feel free to subscribe. If you're very interested in I Ching studies, you might want to consider, first of all, you want to join the Magician's I Ching Facebook group if you're on Facebook. That's open to everybody, and it's got 2,000 people in there, and we're always talking about I Ching stuff, which is very interesting. But if you want to engage in a serious program of study which combines cultivation, meditation practices, and the understanding of the I Ching, then you might want to consider joining the Yi Fa Society, where members of the Yi Fa Society get access to additional videos and written information about each hexagram that I don't put out here. So if you're interested, send me a message on Facebook. You can add me as a friend or message me here, and we'll see about applying you to it. That's everything for today. Thank you very much.